There's a wonderful device for raising tension in horror fiction. It's the gradual approach of danger. Footsteps ascending the staircase, coming closer and closer to your room. A moaning spirit whose cries draw nearer and nearer. A serial killer searching a house room by room, narrowing down the possibilities of where you're hiding. Or an apocalyptic comet in the sky getting larger by the hour are all examples. Indeed, very frequently, a danger's gradual approach is more frightening than its actual presence. When there's impending doom, in other words, the impending can be just as scary as the doom. Yes, there's something almost magical about the way that we're frightened by a threat's slow but unstoppable encroachment. And we're going to draw upon that for today's adventure. Welcome to PhD&D, everyone. I'm Dr. Bowers, and today we're going to talk about the Lighthouse, one of several subdomains of dread in the Sea of Sorrows. The Sea of Sorrows, of course, being the only ocean-bound or sea-bound domain of dread in Ravenloft 5th edition. As with all my videos, we'll talk about what the domain is, list some media to help get an imaginative grip on the place, and then sketch out an adventure. In our case, it's going to be a short, scary one-shot for level 8 PCs. But before we get into that, what is the domain of the Lighthouse? Well, across a million years of water and mist comes a cry so anguished and alone that it shudders in the head and body of anyone who hears it. It is the cry of a foghorn from a lighthouse. And identical to it, equal to it in every way, far off, is the cry of a monster that the lighthouse calls. The monster cries out at the tower across the great gray lawn of the ocean, and the foghorn blows. The monster opens its great toothed mouth, and the sound that comes out is the sound of the foghorn itself, lonely and vast and far away. Some say that the monster loves the lighthouse, but the lighthouse does not love the monster back. Perhaps this explains why the monster has destroyed the lighthouse, wanting to destroy it so that it cannot hurt the monster anymore. But despite the monster's efforts, the lighthouse always comes back, always returns with its call. According to Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft, the lighthouse is equipped with a foghorn, and that foghorn calls a monster. Curiously, Van Richten's guide specifies that the monster does not come from the sea, but from some pit within the basement of the lighthouse itself. That's an interesting idea, but we're not going to use it here. We're going to have a sea monster. And to help us get an imaginative grip on what kind of sea monster and how the PCs will encounter it, let's turn to some media to help us get an imaginative grip. Our adventure is mainly based on two stories. One of them is the 1952 story The Foghorn by Ray Bradbury. It's about a colossal prehistoric creature who is summoned to the surface of the sea by the call of a foghorn, a call which the monster apparently thinks is a mating call. It really doesn't go well for the two men who are inside the lighthouse. I've recommended The Foghorn before in my video on Dutchman's Creek, and I also recommend the short film that it's based on, Howl from Beyond the Fog. The other main source we're using for our adventure is the short tale Me Tidoti Walker from Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, edited by Alvin Schwartz. I absolutely love this weird, scary folktale. It concerns a hunter and his dog, who, finding themselves in the woods after nightfall, happen upon an abandoned cabin and take shelter there. As they shelter, a man hears a distant voice outside, singing, Me Tidoti Walker. In response, his dog looks up and says, Lynchye kinchye kali mali dingo dingo. The man is shocked. How can his dog talk? Moments later, he hears the same voice outside, but closer. Me Tidoti Walker. The man's dog stands up and shouts, Lynchye kinchye kali mali dingo dingo. Moments pass, and again, the man hears the voice, closer, 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 Me Tidoti Walker. And every time it's answered by his dog, who yells louder and louder, Lynchye kinchye kali mali dingo dingo. Then, just as it sounds as though the voice is right outside the cabin door, a bloody human head falls down the chimney and lands in the fireplace. The man's dog drops dead from fright, the head looks at the man, and screams. It's a scary but strange little folktale, which gets its scares from the idea of an approaching unknown danger. As for what those phrases mean, there's some interesting chatter online about that. Alvin Schwartz allegedly got the tale as it was handed down from Scottish and Irish immigrants to the US, and apparently there's some Gaelic in there. The voice is saying something like, You're in my home, brave traveler, and the dog is answering with threats, specifically threats to string up whoever owns the voice. No wonder he drops dead at the story's end. A headless man cannot be hanged, after all. Anyway, those are the two main sources that we're going to use for our Lighthouse adventure. The Foghorn by Ray Bradbury, and Me Tidoti Walker from Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. In addition to those, however, there are a few other stories that I'd like to recommend. There's the 1905 story, A Tropical Horror, written by William Hope Hodgson. This is just a good old sea serpent story, one which chronicles the ill fate of a ship and its crew that encounter a sea serpent. There's also the 1926 tale, The Man Who Was Saved by B.W. Sliney. In this one, we hear about a sea serpent from somebody who survived an attack. Things don't go so well for him either. I also recommend the 2022 short story Siole by Seben Carroll from the anthology Screams from the Dark, edited by Ellen Datlow. It's an excellent tale about sea serpents, and a little more than sea serpents. And the anthology it comes from is really excellent as well, definitely worth picking up. And speaking of anthologies, if you want an excellent anthology full of short stories that take place in a lighthouse that are all scary and weird, check out the 1993 anthology Lighthouse Horrors. Edited by Waugh, Greenberg, and Azarian, this anthology features not only The Foghorn by Ray Bradbury, but Three Skeleton Key by George Tudus, as well as stories by Joe Lansdale, Jack Vance, and Edgar Allan Poe. A real gem, definitely one of a kind. Okay, with sources out of the way, let's sketch out the adventure. We begin with the PCs washed ashore on an island. The weather is fierce, and there doesn't seem to be anything on the island except for a lighthouse, and so it's natural for the PCs to try to take shelter. When the PCs reach the top of the lighthouse, this triggers a series of events. The call of a sea monster, which approaches, getting closer, 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 and the foghorn, which apparently answers it, or maybe even calls the monster. As the monster approaches, a host of other supernatural events take place. These pit the PCs not only against monsters, but against the natural environment itself. So let's get started. As I mentioned, this adventure is for level 8 PCs, and we begin with the PCs regaining consciousness at the sound of a foghorn blast. They find themselves on the rocky shore of a jagged island, whose only visible and therefore only notable feature is a single lighthouse, equipped with a spinning beacon in addition to a foghorn call. Powerful winds prevent flying PCs from leaving the island, and turbulent waters prevent swimming PCs from leaving also. The bitter cold, moreover, should encourage any living PCs to seek shelter. Inside the lighthouse, the PCs can find minimal equipment and supplies, as well as a stairway leading up to the lighthouse's top. Reaching that top where the beacon shines triggers a series of events. 4 of them, specifically. First, there's an enormous boom of thunder, one powerful enough to make the window panes shake. Then there follows a horrible, mournful call, like that of the foghorn, but distinct and far away. As soon as the PCs hear it, they must succeed on a DC 15 Charisma save, or else compulsively answer that monstrous call with a call of their own, moaning and crying as loud as they can for several seconds. That's the first event. Next, the second event, where violent waves crash against the lighthouse's walls. Then suddenly, thousands of fish, in thousands of varieties, all bob to the ocean's surface, staring up at the lighthouse. They all bob together in the sea, fanning like some great peacock's tail. And as they do, 4 giant eels leap from the sea with supernatural strength, crashing through the window panes and attacking the PCs at the lighthouse's top. These eels have the statistics of giant constrictor snakes, and the fierce wind that they let in makes the upper floor difficult terrain. At the battle's end, once again there comes the horrible, mournful call of a monster in the distance. It's louder than before, however, and the PCs must succeed a DC 18 Charisma saving throw, or else join in an eldritch chorus, moaning and crying in response. And joining them are the gurgling cries of so many fishes out in the sea. It's like a chorus of the entire ocean, Neptune's own orchestra. And of course, the blast of the foghorn is part of that chorus. Then comes Event 3. The shoals of fish, gathered in crying multitudes, are now joined by monsters. Hundreds of giant sharks, giant octopi, and plesiosaurs all rise from the deep, staring at the lighthouse in anticipation. And at that moment, a strigoi soars through the shattered windows and attacks the PCs. Instead of summoning 1d4 plus 2 sturges, however, this strigoi summons 1d4 plus 2 harpies. The harpies resemble scaly, fish-eyed mermaids. They have multiple rows of sharp teeth, and their wings are like the wings of dragonflies. As for the strigoi itself, its head looks like an enlarged lionfish, and its vaguely humanoid tiger-striped body is crowned with insectile wings. They all fight to the death, and at the battle's conclusion, the monstrous call again resounds across the sea. This time much closer than before, almost as loud as the Foghorn itself. Here PCs must succeed on a DC 20 charisma saving throw, or else cry out and moan in response. Again, their cries are accompanied by the cries of countless fishes and monsters in the sea, and the blast of the Foghorn. PCs who fail their save fall prone and become frightened for a minute. And towards the end of that minute, we have Event 4. As the chorus of sea life screams and cries, the PCs can see a colossal shape in the distance. It's so huge, and its neck protrudes so far out of the water that it looks like another lighthouse at first. One that's on a collision course with the PCs. As it approaches, a swarm of flying fish with teeth like piranhas fly up and assail the PCs. It has the statistics of a swarm of scarabs from Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft, except of course they look like flying piranhas. At the battle's end, the PCs again hear the monstrous cry, but this time they can see its source very clearly. It's a young sea serpent, except that its size is gargantuan, and it attacks the PCs in the tower immediately. If the PCs flee to the lighthouse's lower levels and try to hide there, I would run the events from the adventure salvage operation in Ghosts of Saltmarsh. Just change the ship to the lighthouse. Have the lighthouse fill with water from the bottom up, and explain how the sea serpent's octopus allies are breaking through the walls with their tentacles, grasping at the PCs. As for the tower itself, it has an armor class of 20 and only 200 hit points. That's not a lot if the sea serpent decides to attack it, since the sea serpent is a siege monster, doing double damage to structures. If the PCs avoid battle and the tower collapses on them, they each take 20 d12 points of bludgeoning damage, easily enough to kill them. And DMs should not keep this potential consequence from the players. Indeed, it's fair to warn them about this possibility. If the PCs defeat the sea serpent, however, it lashes out against the top of the tower in its death throes, and instead of the tower crumbling, it falls on its side like a fallen tree, plunging the PCs into the icy black ocean. Who knows where they will be when they wake up, but hopefully it won't be at the lighthouse. So there's our short little lighthouse adventure. More of an encounter or series of encounters than an adventure, but enough to make it a fun little one-shot for a spooky evening. What do you think? How would you make an adventure in this strange subdomain of dread? Would you have followed the advice in Van Richten's Guide and say that the monster is something that lives beneath the lighthouse itself rather than in the sea? Or are you like me and just love sea monsters? Let me know in the comments. Thanks very much for watching, as always. Don't forget to do all the internet things, click like and subscribe, and don't forget to hit the bell icon if you want notifications on the new videos that I upload to this channel. And thanks!